Hello, friend and colleague. It's Nikki from Full Voice Music. On the show this week, episode 185, season finale. My in-person guest is Dr. Shannon Coates. Shannon has been challenging teachers in our industry to take note and do better. She talks about everything from student-led initiatives to abandoning the master-apprentice approach and some other heartfelt, deep changes that have to happen in our industry. Vocal Pedagogy 101 and beyond right here on the Full Voice Podcast. Hello, friend and colleague. Welcome and thank you. A heartfelt thank you for pressing play. And to all my friends around the world, I'm saying hello. And I want to shout out to Hannah from Tasmania, that island just south of Australia, who took the time to send me a beautiful message. She listened to Liz Jackson Hearns on the podcast, and she wanted to thank Liz and myself. She was really inspired by that conversation. And Hannah, thank you for taking the time to send me that message. It means so much. I cannot tell you how much it made me smile, and I'm thrilled. And yes, Hannah, I swear someday I will show up on your doorstep, because Tasmania has always been on my bucket list. And fun fact, our friend, composer, Glyn Lehman, in Australia, his daughter is going to school in Tasmania. So he has been there, and I cannot wait. So Hannah, thank you for your message. And my friends who are listening, this is our season finale. It has been an incredible year. I always go back through the list and the episodes, and I read the notes, and I am in awe of the incredible people that have given their time and their talent and their expertise and shared it on this podcast. I just can't believe how much I've learned, how many new friends I have. And just like Hannah, we get some great feedback and wonderful comments. This podcast is for private teachers, people running their own businesses. And I know firsthand how much work it is. I know it's a lot of work. So I hope that this podcast has made your life easier, made you smile. I have a couple of announcements before I bring my incredible friend who happened to be here in person. I had the wonderful opportunity. Shannon was adjudicating in Prince Edward Island. And of course, Nova Scotia is just a hop, skip, and a jump away from Prince Edward Island. And so she was able to stay with us for a couple of days. So of course, we talked all about singing and pedagogy and everything for days and days and days. It was the best weekend ever. Anyhow, before I bring Shannon on, I have an exciting announcement. Oh, this feels so good. We have launched our online course. The Happy Singing Teacher Training course is now open and available. Right now, it is a mini course. It has 8 lessons all about working with young singers, and I want to encourage you to take advantage of it. So we're launching the mini course, but we are going to add more lessons, more modules, more guest speakers, more wonderful resources each and every month. If you register for the online course, you have a lifetime access to the course and its growing library of everything for working with a young singer. There will be a direct link in the show notes to our online course. I do hope you take advantage of that. And heads up, You want to sign up soon rather than later because the price will go up as we add more information to it. So take advantage of the introductory offer, and I hope you enjoy the course. We're so proud of it. It's a lot of fun. We've made it fun, concise, great videos. There's videos of working with private students as well as resources that we love. It's a wonderful, comprehensive, concise course for teachers. Now, if you are a studio owner and you have new teachers who are working with the littles, you cannot miss this opportunity. Perfect opportunity for them to level up in their teaching skills. So that, my friends, is my message, the online course. And of course, this is the finale of season 8. This is one of the best interviews. I've had so much fun. This is a huge conversation about pedagogy, how it's changing, how we all are changing, and how we are all working to do better. Ladies and gentlemen, friends and colleagues, Dr. Shannon Coates. Welcome to Hemford Forest. Dr. Shannon Coates in the flesh. I know my listeners can't hear that or see that, but we're going to wrap up season 7 with my good friend, Dr. Shannon Coates, who happens to be in Nova Scotia, and I made her stay with us for the entire weekend. Welcome. How are you?
I am thrilled to be here. This is so fun. It's so fun to do it in person, too. I'm like looking directly into your eyes.
It's not a Zoom call. I don't know what to do other than like...
So awkward.
Oh, it's so awkward. It's so nice. It's been so nice.
It's
And I want to shout out to my sweet husband who has had to listen to 2 exuberant extroverts yammering on about vocal pedagogy and businesses and teaching and all the ridiculous emails we get, and then how we would respond to them if we,
if we took the filters off.
If we took the filters off. No, so kudos to Sean that has had his home inundated and it's just all singing talk. Even my son is like disappeared. He doesn't want to be around.
It's been wonderful.
Oh, it's so nice. It's so nice. And but I have to say, you're here and there's been some really horrible fires. So now everybody's checking in to make sure that we're okay.
So true.
So good news, we are okay. We are not close to the fires and we are thinking of all the people and all our friends who are out there. So I hope everybody's safe. So as always, ever since the day I met you, we have just always just talked so in depth about pedagogy. And it is just, it's just such a huge thing. And if I look back, when did we first meet? What you did, I think you did the vocal instrument 101.
Yes.
Was that 2017?
Oh, Nikki, I do
think it
not
was.
know. Maybe.
It was. I think it was. So
it was a while ago.
It was a while ago. So I met Shannon Coates kind of online. Shannon, you tweeted about the full voice workbooks.
Oh, amazing.
And I was like,
amazing.
Who is this really nice person tweeting about our books? And then you placed an order for our books and I put a little thank you note
yes, you
in
did.
The package.
That I remember. I was like, look at this service.
And then you were doing the Vocal Instrument 101 live seminars.
Correct.
And then I brought you to Hamilton to do it for my people. Sold out. So many people there of all sorts of like teachers, students. Like it was huge. And since then, you've done online courses and now you facilitate incredibly popular and successful pedagogy, online workshops and courses, and you're just really championing the changes that are happening in our industry. Like, I don't know. I kind of think of it like our industry's kind of being called out for a lot of bad behavior. A lot of misunderstanding of what our jobs are. And you've been really like honest and and helpful, and you share some beautiful work done by other people. What motivated you? What's your motivation? Like
What's happening?
Why was this? This is obviously a passion of yours. Why do you? What's the fire? Where'd the fire come from?
Well, we didn't talk about anything about this before, did we? And now I'm like, oh, okay, I have to answer this question. That's fine. It's fine. That's
You're
deep.
welcome.
That's a deep one, Nikki. I'm not sure. I mean, as you know, I did the master's and the doctorate in pedagogy. And I think as I was coming through those academic programs, for which I'm very grateful to have been able to do those programs. But as I was coming through them, I was also one of the, in my program anyway, I was one of the only people who had a lot of experience already teaching in what I call a typical independent voice studio, right? So my colleagues hadn't had any experience teaching in that kind of studio, or had only had experience sort of teaching maybe in a music school or something along those lines, right? Whereas I was coming in with 10 years of already owning my own independent voice studio. So as I was coming through those programs and as I was looking at, the information and the kinds of teaching that we were talking about and the work that we were doing, I was able to kind of pull out from those programs what I wanted to really serve what I knew I needed as an independent teacher, so sort of typical independent teacher, voice teacher, with a typical generalized, I've been talking about this quite a bit lately, actually, about generalizations versus specialization, and how that generalization, the folks who are in a typical independent voice studio are sort of like generalizer teachers, right? We're the teachers who have to have a vast amount of understanding and knowledge to be able to, right? And to be able to, because we're working with singers who are at wildly varying stages of coordination, wildly varying motivations for taking voice lessons, wildly varying time commitment, wildly varying goals, like just so, and styles as well. So we're looking at this necessity to have a vast, broad range of knowledge and information in order to be able to really effectively teach and serve and work with this, vast amount of singers who we're working with in like a typical independent voice studio. And so as I was sort of like coming through that and like understanding the information that I'm getting and kind of trying to put that into what I do in my studio, and then as I'm starting to work more with teachers, that's why the Vocal Instrument 101 came about, because I felt like there was a real need for the kind of information that I was getting in my doctorate degree and my master's, and to a certain extent in my undergrad as well, in an undergrad voice ped class. But I felt like there was a real need for this kind of information to be disseminated in a way that was useful for independent voice teachers. So not just for the folks who are going to go and teach a sort of specialized voice studio, right? So not just for the folks who are going to teach singers who come in at, a specific age and who are at a specific level of coordination already, and who have very, relatively consistent goals and motivation for being in the studio. Right. So that's why I developed, the Vocal Instrument 101 to begin with. And then that sort of just started to somersault forward into, okay, so this information is great. All of this like anatomy and physiology stuff, that's all great. But what would be even greater, even awesomer, is if we also, as independent voice teachers, had access to information about like how to teach, about actual pedagogy, right? Like actually how do we teach, which is part of the reason I love what you do as well, because you're developing those resources, but also supporting how we teach, not just like what I teach, but also how I teach, giving support to like, what do I actually do with this information that I have, right? Like, how do I actually disseminate this information in the best way possible? And you worked with education, like, actual education, classroom educators who have this training, right?
Yeah.
And who have this, understanding of learning stages and this understanding of.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up, because it's interesting, because when you are in our industry of private teachers, and our assistant at the team, Heidi, was in education for over 30 years. Donna Rodenizer was in education for over 30 years. And when I tell her some of the biases and some of the things that we have to kind of overcome, they're like, what do you mean? Like, of course children sing, or what do you mean? Of course you present things like that. And no, you don't do that. And it seems like it's common knowledge, because so there's a hole. There's a hole
there. Exactly. Well, and also, what do you mean that what do you mean they're not using play-based learning? Or what do you mean they're not using like universal design? Like, what do you mean we're not doing these things that are, as you said, like quite common understandings with our education colleagues, right? And in actual pedagogy circles.
And I wanted to speak to that, because we're working on the full voice teacher training, and it's really interesting, because I have Heidi, my assistant, who she goes through my videos for me, and she is brutal because she has gone through so much teacher training, mandatory, right? If you are a classroom teacher, you have those PA days or PD days. You are in some sort of training. And Heidi says, there's some really great trainings, and then there's some things where I want to kill myself, and I can't believe I have to sit through it for a whole day. Like, they have to go through so much professional development. It's mandatory, where a private teacher has to invest in it.
Yes.
Right? It has to come at a cost out of your own pocket, and you're not reimbursed for it.
Well, and also, an independent teacher in our industry, we were talking about this earlier as well. We also aren't conscious of the fact that this actually even is a thing.
Right.
Like, I think that's the sort of first barrier or hurdle to, developing more pedagogy and a deeper understanding of pedagogic principles and understanding like how we teach, is that we're, as independent voice teachers, we're basically teaching the way that our teachers taught us, who may or may not have any training themselves.
Exactly.
And, for the most part, didn't have any training, which is fine. Obviously, it's been working just fine, but how much better can it be? Like, how much better can our teaching be? How much more effective can our teaching be? But we don't actually know that there's this other whole resource out there, because it's not in our industry yet, right? So the whole understanding of the things that our education colleagues are trained in and also are mentored in, they do practical application where you're in a classroom and you're being observed. And I have lots of teacher friends who are like, that was maybe the worst experience of my life, because the person who was observing me was not great. And I also have, there's not great people in all of our industries, of course. And I also have friends who are like, this was a phenomenal learning experience, because the person who was observing me was fantastic.
Right.
And so I really learned how to teach, right? How to do all of these things that, again, we're not necessarily conscious of the fact that this is actually a thing in our industry, right? So we're just teaching along. And we talked about this too, that also then means that we as teachers do not have benchmarks by which to self-evaluate whether our teaching is effective or not, right?
Yes, I want you to expand this. We were talking about it. Like, we've been driving places and
just talking
and then it's like excited talking, and I speed in the car and then I slow down. Yeah, we were talking about this. So there's so many teachers that are using benchmarks of competitions.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
How well did my students do in XYZ festival, in Nats auditions, in, whatever festival, and how well are my students doing on RCM exams, if you're in Canada, especially? How are all of my students getting into the schools that they want to get into? Are my students getting into the choirs they want to get into? Are my students getting into the shows they want to get into? Like, that becomes our benchmark of whether or not we are an effective teacher. And that is an external, somewhat beyond our control, right? And those those things are not necessarily good indicators of whether or not a singer has learned how to be has learned agency in their own singing. Those are good indicators of whether or not a singer has, effectively complied with what you've told them to do, and whether or not they're able to like fit into the thing that is required to get to that benchmark.
They jumped
whether they've jumped through those hoops.
Yeah, the hoops, yeah.
Which again, not necessarily, it's not necessarily a bad thing. There are lots of bad things, but it's not necessarily bad, but it's also not what we think it is in terms of a benchmark of our teaching, right? So we use those things because we don't have any other things to judge by ourselves, to self-assess whether or not we are an effective teacher. So, and we don't have anything else to effectively assess whether the learning has happened. So, right? So
good, yeah.
we use exams, we use et cetera. We use all of these things.
If I can speak to that for a second, one of the things that we end up doing, because I did this for a long time, so I put up my hand and I say that I'm guilty of this, but we also won't allow, like we'll assess students based on will they do good at the things that I'm going to benchmark myself in, and then we don't allow other students into our studio because they know they won't serve us for that type of benchmarking.
Exactly.
So we end up discriminating against students who just won't meet those standards.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, the thing that used to make me rage was, well, basically I'm going to do an assessment, and I'm basing it on what they would get in a RCM exam. Are they ready to do an RCM exam? Well, then you're ready for my studio. And that used to make me Hulk smash rage. like the scene where like the Hulk took Loki and smashed him back and forth like that. It's like, that's not fair. The whole point of them coming to us is they want to learn, but we're already putting this bar up that, well, I need you to be able to do A, B, C, and D so that I get the recognition that I feel that I need.
Well, and also so then I can continue to affirm that I am an effective teacher, that I'm good at my job. And there is nothing wrong with wanting to be good at your job. Obviously, we all want to be good at our jobs. Our intention is to be good at our job. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just, as we're saying here, our industry, because we don't have some of the other things that some of our colleagues do, and have this understanding of other ways to assess learning and other ways to assess teaching, we pull in these benchmarks and ways of assessing that are basically false. The equivalency of this is, when we use, say, a written test to assess, I don't know, whether, to assess whether someone has learned something in history.
Right.
So we use a written test. So, and then we use the grades of that test to assess whether or not I am an effective teacher. It is backwards. It is backwards because first of all, what those tests assess is who's good at taking tests, who's good at writing, who's good at reading, who's good at taking out information from reading and writing, and who's good at taking tests. That's what it assesses, right? That's the main thing it assesses.
Who has executive functioning skills?
Who has executive functioning skills?
Right.
Who doesn't have test anxiety? Like who performs well without, right? Who is not an anxious person? Like it assesses a lot of things that are not necessarily related to whether or not you've actually learned something. And then in our school systems, I mean, this is gradually changing. There's lots of things changing in our education system, which again, we're not seeing yet in our studios, but anyway, and then the school system uses the grades of the class to assess whether the teacher is doing their job or not. And it has nothing to do with, and this, teachers hate it because they get like, I'm just teaching to the test so that I can keep my job, or so that I can like continue to get the funding I need, or whatever, like all I'm doing is like, just cramming facts down and telling them how to take a test. Like that's all we're doing. I can't assess whether or not they're actually learning, right? I don't have the tools or the motivation or the administrative support to do actual learning and assessment. So then that just kind of sneaks in. And again, we were talking about this. I went to a teaching and learning conference put on by the University of Toronto, put on by the all of the sort of educational branches within the University of Toronto.
Interesting.
And it was, I mean, it was incredibly validating. It felt so validating for me. Yay. But so validating because so many of the things that are happening in education circles, in our actual pedagogy, our actual education circles, so many of the topics that they're discussing, so many of the things that we're working to implement in classrooms, so many of the DEI initiatives, so many of the inclusive classroom strategies, so many of the learning strategies that we're implementing in classrooms are the things that we can do so easily in the voice studio. Like these things. And so I'm in this conference going, oh my gosh, this is amazing, because all of these people are talking about the things that we can do like this in the voice studio.
Right.
All we need is like that change in our, like, first of all, we need to be aware of it. It has to be conscious. We have to understand that there is another way to do this.
Right.
And then we need the tools to be able to actually implement, right? And also some mentoring and all that stuff to just sort of see that it's possible and how to do it. But that's it's so exciting because the classroom teachers are like, okay, they're struggling with like, how do I like manage a classroom, a group, plus implement like these learning strategies, plus like administering a test to a group of students. The reason we do it that way is because it's the most efficient way to, see whether something has been learned, but it isn't really great.
Right. Yep.
So whereas we don't have to do that because we're working one-on-one, in small groups,
yeah.
like we don't have to do that. We have all of the, we have this system already set up for us where we're in the best place to be able to implement this pedagogy. We're in an amazing place to do it.
It's interesting too, because I know that in my early years of teaching, like talking about teaching to the test, like I chose examinations and competitions as a way to show families the value, right? So to me, it was like, it was something that I needed to do to prove that, right? And it was so unfortunate because, there'd be some really great young people that really wanted to sing, but again, they're not going to place in a festival because they're not there yet, or it's just not it's not a place for them. And, you feel like you failed them, or you have to do all this damage control. And it was so stressful.
Yes.
And
I think you're speaking too in that when you're speaking about that as well, I think you're speaking about the cultural shift that actually has to happen as well. Which again, I think is happening in our, like I said, teachers are working through this in classroom education as well. But that also has to be a cultural shift for us in the Independent Voice Studio, where we stop communicating to parents and we do the education with parents, and, any singers who are coming in who are adults, where we're doing the education that says the benchmark for your success, we're going to figure it out together, and you get to be in charge of that,
Nice.
right? I'm going to support you while we figure out what the benchmarks for success are for you. So and again, this is why we can do this so effectively in the Independent Voice Studio, because I'm just working one-on-one. I don't have to work with groups. We can sit down and figure out what do you want to do with your voice? Okay,
Right.
great. And then how will that look like in your voice? Okay, and also how will you know that you are being successful and you're actually on the trajectory toward what you want to be able to do with your voice? So let's figure that out together. And then if singing in a festival is part of that trajectory, that's one thing, right? Like maybe people feel like, yes, this is part of the way that I can, judge for myself whether or not I'm becoming more comfortable as a performer. Terrific. That's amazing. But other people may feel like, or maybe people feel like they want to do, RCM exams or whatever, right? But then they get to decide. And they also then are not going in as if this is a, final assessment of all of my singing and all of my learning. They're going in with, this is a formative assessment. This is a one little thing in my journey toward my goals that will give me good information about where I am in my learning versus this is gonna, like, whether I get an A or a B or whether I get a 90 or a, or whether I get first or second, that is the benchmark of my success. No, it becomes part of the journey of learning versus like this, final assessment of whether or not I've learned a thing.
I love that conversation. And I know in the last few years, moving towards more student-led
Yes.
and having more conversations with parents where it's like, oh, by the way, these are student-led.
Yeah.
So we need to know what's our goals.
Yeah.
Like where do you want to go? I do want to speak to the fact that a lot of people have never been asked that question.
100%.
And they don't really have an answer for you right away. And how do you manage that? Like when you have a student that comes to you and parents that come to you, well, she likes to sing and I don't know.
Yep.
How do you manage that?
So yeah, absolutely.
I'm asking you the hard questions.
No,
we never practiced.
We didn't even
this one.
practice any of these, but I love it. I love it because these are the questions that people ask, right? And this is also, so before I answer, let me say two things about this. One thing is that often, you will hear folks who teach in specialized voice studios. Again, those are the voice studios or who are specialized, they're specialization folks these are the folks who teach a very specific population of singers, and generally those singers tend to have very specific goals. They're coming to voice lessons for a very specific reason. I want to get my degree. I want to become a rock pop singer or whatever. Like they've got a very specific goal and they're generally at a maturity level, right? So that specialization generally tends to have, they're coming to you because of your specialization.
Right.
So when those folks say, well, it's student-led, and so just whatever, like all we have to do is figure out their goals and then we work from there. That can make those of us who work in generalization and who are more generalized teachers feel like, okay, yeah, that's great for you because you have all of the singers you work with have very specific goals.
Yeah, and they come to you with those goals.
Yes, that's the reason they are studying with you. So that's easy to do. So good for you, and also thanks a lot, dude. Like for telling me, right? Like so it feels gross in some cases. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that we often, people ask me this all the time. So yeah, that's my problem with student-led is that students don't know what they want. They don't know, right? And in some cases, it's because no one has asked them ever in their whole academic career, anywhere, whether in a teaching situation or a learning situation, what they want to learn. No one has ever asked them that. So in some cases, and in some cases, it's because they really maybe they're taking voice lessons because their mom and dad want them to, or maybe they're taking voice lessons because their friend is, or maybe they're taking voice lessons. I mean, they really have not considered it, right? And that for me is certainly that is far more common again in that independent studio situation. And so, yes. So where do we go for that? So that just means that they are when I'm always sort of encouraging teachers to seed those questions, regardless of whether or not they have the answers right away, right?
Sure.
So you're just seeding those questions right from the beginning. And we tend to do this anyway. Why are you taking voice lessons? What would you like to blah, blah, blah. And if they can't give you answers, or if their answer is something like, well, I just want to sing. I just want to learn how to sing. Terrific. That's where we start. That's absolutely fine. But as voice teachers, then, we want to be really conscious of where they are in the learning journey. So if they're at the very beginning of their sort of learning journey or their agency journey, if you will, or their student-led journey, they're at the very beginning, that requires us as voice teachers and as teachers to just be far more supportive and less, and give far more options. So, okay, what would you like to sing? They don't know what they want to sing. Okay, let me give you 5 options. You go home and take a listen. Which one do you want to sing? So that means rather than throwing it all on you because you don't know,
Sure.
I'm just going to give you lots of options until you start to figure out. And then, terrific, you chose this song. Okay, let's figure out why. What do you love about singing this song? Terrific. So you're consistently sort of seeding that, like asking the questions. Oh, okay, you hate that song. What do you hate about it? And if they don't know what they hate about it, you offer them options. Okay, did you hate the rhythm? Did you hate this lyrics? Did you hate the, I don't know, the voice of the singer you were listening to? Did you hate? And if they can't tell you, that's fine. But that's the process where you're continually offering the options and you're continually kind of like just digging down, asking the questions so that they start to get into the habit of asking the questions themselves
Right.
and being able to notice when they're making decisions and why they're making the decisions. And that starts to move you through then. There are 4 stages of a student-led learning or student, the word has gone out of my head, but student-led learning, there are 4 stages of student-led development or something along those lines.
Okay.
And that first stage is the very supportive, like I'm here in a very supportive role for you. And I'm offering all of this, like, it's the same thing when you say, how did that feel? And they're like, I don't know. So then you give options, right? So then you say, okay, did it feel this? Did it feel that? Did you like this? What happened there? Blah, blah, blah. Or you draw their attention to something specific. All right, let's try it again. Notice what's happening in your tongue. I don't know. Notice which color it feels like you're singing, whatever. And then tell me that afterwards. So again, you're offering all of these options so that they are moving toward that and they're constantly like in that place of like starting to think about it, just getting used to thinking about it. And then they start to move toward being able to start to answer some of those questions or even just being able to choose some options.
I thank you for all of that. I'm thinking about all of the teachers that come to the forums and they're like, I have a student and I've given them this song and 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 they hate them all and I'm so frustrated. So I love what you just said there because maybe we look at it as it's just data.
Yes. Yes.
It's just data. You don't have to take it personally.
Exactly.
They're not insulting you by not liking. And the other thing I wanted to add to that too, especially, you and I are from another, generation. I don't know a nice way to say we are older.
Are you saying we're old?
Well, I mean, I'm aging myself. I loved my Sony Walkman.
Right. Yes. Yes.
And I had tapes.
Yeah.
And I listened to the radio. And when I found music that I liked, I had to buy it and I listened to it and I listened to it and I listened to it. That's not the experience of kids anymore.
Right.
They have access to every piece of music ever written. If they, like my singer that loves musical theater will go and watch 5 different professional performances and she'll be like, I'm referencing this performance here, not this performance here. And and I can't even imagine, okay, I'm totally dating myself. I remember in jazz school having to go to the library to listen to some Ella Fitzgerald. I had to sign out the recording, right? And now I can see everything that she ever did on my phone, in bed, in my pajamas. With a cup of tea.
I know.
So when we say to kids, what do you like? There's just a multitude of things. And for teachers out there listening, I get frustrated too.
Yeah,
I
of
do.
course.
Or then they give me something and I'm like, oh, you've got to be kidding me. Yeah. But there's something in that piece of music that they're connecting with. Yeah. And if you can figure it out, you can go then to the next step.
Yeah. And also if you're working in that way where you're saying, oh, okay, so what do you love about this? And even if they cannot tell you, and even if they can't choose an option once you give the options, again, you're seeding that. You're just seeding it, and it's just data. They can't tell you yet, and that's fine because there are stages of development for this. We develop agency. It's a learned thing. It's not a thing. Well, some people have more agency than others off the top, but like when they come into the studio, for sure. But this agency is a learned thing, learning what I want and also learning that I can ask for what I want, and also learning why I want it,
Yeah.
and also learning how to self-assess whether I am moving toward what I want. That is a learned skill, friend. And that's, when we're not supporting that, we keep them in, like when we are continually telling them what they should do, what they should be listening to, what they should, like when we're continually in that, and also when we are continually saying, you're doing this because of this. This should feel like this. There should be this. Like when we're continually like giving them all of the feedback about what's happening, that keeps them in the sort of infancy stage of agency. That keeps them, and that keeps us in the like over role, right? Like that keeps us in the power over role, rather than gradually moving toward this, conversation around what do you love, and also why, and also how do you know when you're doing the things that you love.
Oh, this is so powerful. So the one thing I wanted to add to that, about them learning how to communicate and not knowing why, or and constantly helping them to that focusing inward, is one thing I wanted to add to that, because this is something that Sean and I were talking about the other night. So if my listeners to the podcast know, I talk about our son all the time. He loves baseball more than he loves his mama. And, but he is very passionate about the music that he listens to. His music, remember you got in the car. So Shannon Coates had to come to know his game. She cheered him on,
Which I enjoyed.
She was a good auntie. And, but remember when he was like, he didn't have his phone?
Yes.
Right?
That was
the
hard.
only reason that he wanted his phone, because he wants to listen to his music so badly. But here's the thing. He's 12.
Yep.
He does not want to share with us the music that he listens to. It's very personal. Very personal. And Dr. Ginevra Williams talks about this, about that age group and identity and who they are and what that music means to them. And then you got a voice teacher coming in telling you shouldn't listen to this and this is making you do this and this is the music you should like. Like that's just that crosses a very, very deep line.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, and so that is, I love, what Ginevra does as well, right? Because she brings in the like psychosocial science as well, right?
Huge,
like so she's like, and here are the reasons that this is not good for developing people because of who they are as people and where they are in their development as people, right? Which I absolutely love. And also that's the science part. We have the data for that. We know that this is not awesome. And on the other side, we also know experientially that this is not awesome. How many teachers do you know, and how many singers do you know who do not have fond memories of their, Nikki's putting her hand up, who do not have fond memories of their very well-intentioned voice teachers who, forced them to sing stuff.
Well, okay. I've shared this before. I have to get it out because I'm feeling the feels. I did everything my teacher asked. I was a good student. I sang everything she gave me. I did everything she asked. And the one time I wanted to sing, and it wasn't a rock song. It wasn't a belt song. It was just a folk song that I really loved. And my dad played the guitar for me, and she went up one side me and down the other, and she didn't even hear it. And that was the end of my relationship with that teacher. I was like 12 going on 13, and I had been like, and talk about like student that went to the festival and won all the awards. Like if you needed some validation, I totally... I gave that to you, and you couldn't even give me the time of day to hear a song that meant so much to me that that's
exactly. So we have, there's some discussion I just saw today on some of the one of the forums about like experiential versus like what's actual science. And I just want to say that in many cases, what is experiential is backed by science. There's a reason that we have this feeling of how your relationship was broken. There's a reason.
That was a violation of trust.
It was a violation, and that is that is real. It's not just because you had this experience. The experiential goes with the, so.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I want to speak to that too. Even though that really affected me.
Yeah.
I still went into teaching thinking that I knew better than my students.
Yes, exactly.
So shame on me.
Right.
Like, you hurt me, but here I am pulling the same crap.
Yes.
Right.
And that, yeah, exactly. So, and I was just going to say too, like, it feels like I would hope that in our day and age, and especially folks who listen to your podcast, I would hope that there are not folks who are in this time doing that. I would hope who are not shutting students down. Yeah. And I think that there is still a very, like you're saying, a very sort of pervasive, like, undercurrent that means that we still do like negotiations with students, right? So we do like, okay, well, you can sing the song you like if you sing this art song. You can sing you can sing in the music theater section in the festival, so long as you do an RCM exam. You can sing so we're still doing this like very subtle negotiation, maybe not that subtle, I don't know. We're still doing this negotiation of like, if you're compliant, I'll give you what you want, right? Like, and that is just as damaging. That is maybe not just as damaging, but that is just as ineffective in terms of learning, right? That is just as, it shuts down learning so fast. It is so ineffective. It is such an ineffective way to learn. And what you're teaching students is compliance, right? So you're not teaching agency. You're not giving students the ability to understand who they are as people, who they are as singers, what they want to say, what they want to communicate. You're not, that's the essence of singing, is it not? Yeah. Like to discover who I am and to have a deeper discovery of what I want to say and who I am in the world and what I want to communicate and how I want to communicate it. Like and I think if you talk to teachers and you say, wouldn't you love to be a teacher who supports singers who discover who they are? Of course, every single one of us will be like, yeah, of course. And that's exactly who I want to be. Right. And then we go out and do the things in our teaching because it's unexamined and because we don't know what the other options are. It's unexamined. So we go out and do the things in our teaching that we've been taught and that we just pulled in from because we think it's the right thing to do. And we're just doing our best because that's what we know. And we perpetrate the same thing. Like we just continue to do the same thing. That is not agency supporting and it is not student led. It's not leading to students having this experience of being able to communicate and really understand their own goals and what they want to say, So, yeah. So that all...
I love that.
That was
deep. Heavy.
That got deep real quick.
No, that was good. That is so important. It's so important. Now, we were sharing, you were sharing, again, we were driving in the car going somewhere and you were sharing your... Okay, I love a pithy slogan. Yes. Okay, so there was a meditation support community online during the pandemic, and it was an online meditation, and then you would study a pithy Buddhist slogan, and there's like 58 of them. And they're like. The slogan itself is pretty simple, but the conversation about it is like, it's deep, right? So we'd have a meditation, we'd have a little welcome, how are you doing, kind of check in, and then we would discuss the pithy slogan of the week. And it was mind blowing. So when you told me the pithy singing slogans, I was like, oh my gosh, there's pithy singing slogans. I love it. So pithy singing slogans.
Let me put them into, let me just sort of put this into context. So as I started, as I started to develop, as I started to move more out of like anatomy and physiology and teaching, like, working with voice teachers to develop their understanding of like, what's happening in the body and all that stuff and coordinations. I came very quickly into the understanding. I came very quickly into the understanding that what we actually need more of, or what is going to be even more useful for us if we want to be the kinds of teachers that we say we want to be, is an understanding of how to teach. And so that then motivated like the voice ped degree, which is one of the things that I have started to do, as well as some of the other courses that I've started to do, as well as how I've changed some of the way that I work with the undergraduate voice pedagogy course that I teach, et cetera. So that really motivated some changes there away from this, real focus on like, let's make sure you have this understanding of anatomy and physiology or the way that things work, into let's make sure that you actually understand how to teach. Let's get over to that side a little faster. And so then that motivated me to sort of start to gather up some of these little pithy sayings to go with the concepts that I was, so some of the concepts. Yeah. So one of my favorite, I have, I brought 4 to the table today.
Okay.
So
okay.
just only 4.
Okay, what's
I
your
have
favorite?
several, but
What's your
one
favorite?
of my favorites is demo over describe. So demonstrate over describe. And this one goes along with the, our understanding of like motor learning and how we acquire motor skills and how we acquire new coordinations, right? And especially, again, when we're working with in a generalization situation versus a specialization situation. So again, this is something that we hear from the specialization folks, like the specialized folks, where they're like, oh, don't sing too much in your lesson, don't do too much demonstrating, you don't want them to sound like you, blah, blah, blah. We hear that from the specialization folks, when in fact, in our generalization, we want to do a lot more demonstrating than we do, because what we want to do is we want to demonstrate coordinations and tonal outcomes. We want the brain to be able to go toward a sound, to coordinate toward a sound, so that the brain has something to work toward, right? It needs something to move toward. So the more we can demonstrate, even if we're not demonstrating in the octave, we're not demonstrating, like, so long as we're demonstrating that concept and that coordination, the more effective the learning can be, because the more we describe it, the less effective the motor learning is, right? I described to you, okay, so now I would like for you're going to learn how to do a mixed belt. Okay. So
and then you tell what the vocal folds are doing.
Yeah. Or I say to you, and it's going to feel like this, and you're going to do that. And I want you to make sure that your mouth is in this position, and you're going to do this. This is like a whole checklist of things that my brain has to think of. But like coordination is that fast, like faster, right? So it's way more effective if I say, it'll sound like this, blah, 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 whatever. Now you do it. Great. Let's do it again. Demo over describe.
I love it. Okay, I have to share you. I got to go back to baseball world.
Yes.
Noah because I told you about this.
Yeah.
Noah has been very fortunate to have Cuban coaches. And one year his coach, Damien, brought up a friend from Cuba in the winter. Poor guy, had never seen snow before in his life.
This is wrong.
And he was like shivering all the time. But he could not speak English.
Right.
And he was the most effective coach that my son has ever had.
Yeah.
Because he could only say yes, no, and do it. And or like
and more
this.
like this.
Like
Do
this.
it like this.
That was the word, like this. And he would like hold the bat, show my son and go like this, and then hand the bat to my son. And there was no conversation about anything or descriptions of muscle groups or anything. And the transformation was incredible. And there was very little, the communication was in showing physical things, and he would demonstrate and he would go, no, yes, like this.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Yeah.
And that was it.
And we can learn a coordination so much more effectively by listening or watching or whatever and doing and giving ourselves 3 or 4, 5, 6 repetitions to just let the body figure it out.
Could you imagine going to a yoga class where they never demonstrated? They just stood in front of you
and
they
told
just
you?
sat on the yoga mat and said, okay, you're going to take your right leg. I mean, I'd be done there. I'd be like, okay, wait, is this
Right
my
leg?
right leg?
Which one?
Oh, right. This is my right leg. Right.
Exactly.
And could you imagine how miserable that class would be?
Yeah.
Right. I always, you have to watch them and then you have to do it. Yeah.
Yep. Demo over describe. The other one that goes along with that one for me is exploration over explanation.
I love that one.
Yeah.
That's my favorite one.
Exploration over explanation. And for me, that one is after someone has done, they've done some singing, they've done some work, they've, maybe acquired a skill or maybe not. Maybe they haven't been quite successful in that coordination. So rather than, and sometimes what will happen is they'll say, oh yeah, that felt a lot better. And then we go, yeah, that's because you did blah, 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 and you did this and that, and you did all the things. Yeah, you did this. Or they'll say, oh no, that didn't really work. And then we say, oh, that's because blah, 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 right? And so next time you need to do blah, 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 blah. Exactly. And I mean, there is a time and a place for explanation for sure. But overall, we tend to way over explain, which then means that we're not doing the thing. So what is a better way? A better way or more effective way for us to teach and for singers to learn is you give me some feedback and you say, that felt really good. Oh, amazing. What felt good about it? Great. Let's try it again like 3 times and see if we can get that same feeling.
Brilliant.
Right? Explore it. Oh, that felt terrible. What felt terrible about it? Okay, that's interesting. What part of that was really good? Which one of those was the least terrible? Amazing. Let's try it and see if we can get it the least terrible now. That one is find over fix, which we can talk about in a minute. But so we're going into exploration rather than me like yammer, right? We're just trying to get that. We're trying to get that speech to singing ratio really skewed towards singing, like as much as possible.
I think it was you. I'm pretty sure it was you. I always credit you. I mean, when you're going through an exercise with a student, I mean, my first instinct, I think a lot of people's instinct is you hear something and you immediately want to correct it.
Right.
And my rule now is I will not let myself interrupt until they've had or offer any correction until they've done it at least 3 times, 4, even more.
Yes.
Because 90% of the time they auto fix it. They correct it. I'm going to do baseball thing again. Forgive me, listeners. When the boys are warming up, no correction is offered until they've like thrown a whole bunch of pitches because they are throwing crazy because they're not warmed up and they're figuring it out and they're getting into their bodies. Yeah. And only after a certain amount of time does any correction to their technique or their mechanics go.
Absolutely.
And that was the same. It was the same coaches that are like, we don't fix anything until they've warmed up.
Yeah.
End.
And exactly. And I mean, this is, again, as conscientious, well-intentioned teachers, we feel it's our job to make sure they know all the things. That's not our job. No. Our job is to support them as they learn. So, yes, here's how we do the exercise. And this I ask teachers all the time. I want you to literally count to 3. 1, that's 1 repetition, good. 2 repetitions, and you're not allowed to give any feedback. I mean, you can do a little bit of modeling. You could do like the inhalation model or whatever. You can do like a gesture model, whatever. That's all fine. Like the sort of, the modeling to give a little bit of like direction to what they're doing for sure. But no feedback and no new directive. Like absolutely not. No new directive. Absolutely not. So because what does that do? It takes away their agency in figuring it out for themselves, right? So as soon as I'm like, you've sung it once and I'm like, okay, so now make sure you do blah, blah, blah. I didn't even get a chance to do the first thing that I was trying to do yet. And also, okay, so now I'm going to add the new thing. I don't even know what I'm thinking about anymore.
And, I get it too, because, you're in that 30-minute, 45-minute lesson and you want to be like productive. I'm doing air quotes. And you want to fix all the things because your people are paying you a lot of money and you got to show them that you're fixing the things. It's hard. It's really, really hard. I might have gotten this from you as well. I talk to so many people. It's hard to attribute to who I took this from. But sometimes one of the things, especially with the littles, that I find is effective. So let's say we're singing a phrase and they're just kind of underneath one of the notes. I'll say, I love how you are opening your jaw on that high note. Yes. And they immediately go, oh. And now they're thinking about opening their jaw on that high note and they're excited to do it rather than, oh, you're not hitting that high note. We really need to work on that. And, know, and that is like gold. I always see, oh yeah. And they're like, yes. And it's like, gold. It works every time.
That is one of my favorites. And I don't have a really pithy fun one for that one, but I have 2 for that. One is ask for what you want. Rather than pointing out what is not working, right? So ask for what you want. What do I want? I want to see more of that jaw drop. Oh, I love that jaw drop. I would love to see that more, right?
Wow, yeah.
So versus like...
your jaw's really tight.
Yes.
Your jaw's really tight and you're really not opening your jaw. It must be from all the gum chewing and belting that you do.
Just ask for what you want. Just ask for what you want. But it also means you have to be way more clear in your own head about what you're listening to as well, right? And what you're observing. Like you have to be way more clear in your own head. And the other one is that I also mesh that one in with using growth language. It's not quite growth language, but I like it. Ask for what you want, positive directives, and use growth language. Those I kind of mesh together because the positive directive is like, I'm going to ask you to do the thing that I want. The positive directive is based on like one more time with your jaw as open as you just did it versus one more time, remember not to close your jaw.
And that's neurolinguistic. Yes, that's right. Yes. Like it's like if you don't say the word no or don't or stop or because the brain will hear no, don't stop and and
you can't do a not.
Right.
Like you can't do a not, right?
Sure.
Like, so don't close your mouth. What do I do? Yeah. Right? Give them something to do is the other one that I do as well. And also the other thing along with that, like, let them explore it is literally say out loud, if you're not used to doing it yet, literally say out loud, I would love to hear that 4 times. Like literally just say it out loud. And then so I can always tell when I first started working with teachers in this way, so often the students have been so trained to get their feedback immediately from the teacher that they'll sing it once and then they look directly at the teacher, right?
Yes.
They're so trained. We train them to do that because
and they're waiting for your approval.
They're waiting for whether or not they did it, right? And they'll sing it once and they're waiting and they have no sense of like whether or not they actually did it for themselves. They have absolutely no sense yet. So that is one way to start to like break that cycle. And sometimes even at the beginning when you start to do this, sometimes because the singers are so well trained, you can say, I would love to hear that 4 times. And they'll still sing it once and look at you.
Yeah.
And you're like, no, like you still got another 3 times. Let's go.
Right.
Just, keep going. And it can be uncomfortable to kind of break that cycle. But that is one way to start is to say it out loud.
One of the reasons why kids struggle with practicing is because they haven't been able to sing things enough in the lesson. They just don't know the song, and they don't have the muscle memory because you've stopped them so many times.
Or they don't, and again, this is part of the self-assessment, right? They're used to, their only way to know whether they're doing it right or wrong, quote unquote, is whether you tell them. So you're not there in the practice room with them. They have no way of knowing. So that's the again, that's the sort of exploration over explanation too, is you do it 4 times. And now I ask you, which one was your favorite?
Mm-hmm.
Why? Mm-hmm. What did you love about it? Okay, let's do it another 4 times. And let's see if we can get 3 out of 4 of those to sound just like your favorite, or to sound like gummy bears because that's why you loved it. I don't know, whatever it was, right? Yeah. And so then they go home and they practice and they go like, I know what I'm looking for. I'm looking for gummy bears in this exercise. Yeah. And I know what gummy bears feels right? Like. Yeah. And that's the agency. So then they can actually go home and effectively work on whatever it was, because they actually have their own benchmarks for success, which is what we want to develop as teachers too, but that's a different thing.
I love that. You had another one.
So the one that I mentioned earlier kind of in passing was find over fix. Okay, and that is Cindy Dewey's. That is Dr. Cindy Dewey's, which I was like, oh yeah, that's good. I'm taking it. But again, so that is when we're listening to singers, there's a whole bunch of ways to apply this, but when we're listening to singers and we're listening and we're hearing, whatever it is they're working on, and there's something happening that is miscoordinated, not working, not what they want to do, etc. Rather than looking for the thing I need to fix, which is what we do as voice teachers, right? We diagnose, as McKinney's book says, the diagnosis and correction of vocal faults, right? Yes. We're diagnosed for the thing that's wrong.
Right.
So it's not a bad thing, again, morally, it's not a bad thing to hear that something isn't working. That's part of our job. But rather than articulating the thing that isn't working, put that in your back pocket and figure out what it is that needs to happen in order for the thing to work better. Find the thing. So then you start to ask for that thing. So again, someone's singing flat. Okay, they're singing flat. Rather than me saying, ooh, you're singing flat, you got to make it sharper, what am I going to do? I'm going to think to myself, okay, what's the thing that will actually be useful to find the coordination that will perhaps change the flatness? I don't even have to mention flatness. What I might mention is, how much more energized can that singing be?
Nice.
That's what I actually wanted, right? So I'm going to find that thing. I'm going to ask for that thing. The other application, and then they don't even know that they were singing flat.
I do that all the time. I say, smile on me.
Yeah.
Smile on me.
Yeah.
Right? When they're singing do, re, mi, and it's
find
like
that energy. Find it. Find the energy. And so I'm asking for the coordination. I'm asking them to do the coordination that is actually going to fix, quote unquote, the thing. And then they don't get a hang up over it. And and they don't have to know, right? And then they're going toward the thing they want. And the other application of that is when you're working with singers and the first thing they say is, ooh, that was really terrible. Ooh, I didn't like that. Or that wasn't good, or blah, blah, blah. So what do? I go in for, rather than, oh, what didn't you like about it? Which is also a possibility, but not my favorite, but also a possibility. And rather than immediately trying to fix it, that's the other thing, right? Because we go like, oh, okay, well then let's try blah, blah, blah. Don't try to fix it. Say, what did you love about it? Was there any, right? So, and maybe they'll say, that was like super uncomfortable. Okay, which one was actually comfortable? Which part of it was comfortable? Which part of it was the least uncomfortable? Terrific. Let's figure out what was awesome about that comfortableness. And let's see if we can spread that shite all over the place, right? Let's just see if we can get that coordination going in all of the other areas. So we work from, and that's the other thing, is that often singers will say, well, that felt uncomfortable and blah, blah, blah. And we jump in immediately to fix when it may not actually be something that needs to be fixed, right? We jump in immediately, right? They give us feedback and we're like, oh yeah, well, let me help you fix that. Okay, well, I think what we can do about that is blah, blah, blah. That's so much work. You don't need to work that hard, especially because it's not your job. So your job is to facilitate learning and agency, right? Your job is not to fix the problems. Your job is to facilitate learning and give options. So when someone says, "Oh, this was bad," or "I didn't like that," or blah blah blah, or that was really hurting, and in that one part, okay, our first instinct is like, "Oh, it shouldn't hurt." You're right, it shouldn't hurt, but what's a better way to go about it? Which part was the least hurty? Where, if you're singing a scale, maybe, or you're going up into the chorus or something, and you're like, all of a sudden it feels straining. Terrific. Which part was the least straining, or where did that strain start to come in? Terrific. Let's get that note just before, and let's play with that a little bit and just see if we can have the same sensation that you have in that note just before, moving up and down. Let's just see, what are you doing about that you love?
One of the things I started doing through the pandemic, we started learning, like when we were first trying to figure everything out, I ditched all sorts of like piano-based exercises. And the warm-up was, bring me a song you wanted to sing.
Yes.
I don't care what it is. Let's just sing it. And there was not a lot of correction because it was just a warm-up, and it was very freeing. But the thing I started doing, which was really profound, was I kept asking them, what is your favorite line in this song to sing? Like, what line? And I'm like, you don't have to share it with me, but what line just makes you think of something so like you can't, it's all there. That was huge. And I'm like, okay, now can you spread that to other lines? Like, what other lines could you really dig into?
Yeah.
And that was huge. And especially in a time when kids are really dealing with a lot of emotions, and we all were dealing with so much stress and change and scary things. Like that was huge.
Yeah.
And it was, I think honestly, I had the best lessons sometimes during that, because everything was changed and we were coming at it at a different approach. And it was about finding the things that they love.
Yes. Yeah. And that, and again, what does that teach? That teaches them, they go home. When I'm practicing, am I working to fix something, or am I working to find the thing I love in this, right? It brings us back to like, what do I love? And also, why do I love it? Oh, as they start to get older, as they start to get more agency, why do I love it? And then I can see the things that I love in this, and I can also find the things that I love in this part, or in this part of the voice maybe, or in these other songs. Or then I can start to choose repertoire based on the things that I know I love already, right?
Yeah.
I can start to choose songs to sing based on the things I love. And this also works, this is also so useful for, I am a fan of offering, especially again in our traditional independent voice studio. I am a big fan, a proponent of making sure that we're offering lots of style options to singers, the singers we work with, because without taking voice lessons, they may never be exposed to, let's say, a folk song, right? They may never
Interesting.
be exposed to, I don't know, something that they would maybe an art song, right? Like they would never be exposed to that. So I mean, as you know, I'm not a fan of like, and now you have to sing an art song, but I am a fan of, oh, you love this song because of what it's saying and the mood of that song and what it's speaking to you about. I would love for you to listen to this song, and this song. One of them happens to be opera. One of them happens to be an art song. And one of them happens to be, I don't know.
Jazz.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And because and let me know if you feel like those have bring up the same kinds of emotions in you that this song does. So that is a way to open the door to some of these other styles without enforcing them, right? We open the door, we offer some options, and who knows, maybe they will say, you know what, that opera friggin' spoke to me, and now I would like to learn a little bit of classical singing. That is the way in to teaching classical singing if you want to, if you feel like that's the way in. The telling people that they have to do it because it's good for them is, terrible. Don't do that. But that's the way in so as they start to be able to articulate what they love, as they start to be able to articulate why they love it, that's then your gateway into opening and showing all of the different, there's so much music, right? There's so much music.
So much.
And that's the gateway to sort of showing some of these other styles that they may never be exposed to if they weren't taking voice lessons,
I want to thank you for all of that, but I also want to acknowledge that if you've been teaching for a long time and you're reflecting back and you never had those opportunities, right? Like you're going to feel some feelings about that, right? Feelings are gross and you like, because it's going to bring up some stuff. If you were not held in a space where your authentic voice, I know Jessica Baldwin has been on our podcast. She's talked about this.
So
she
beautiful.
runs programs for teachers who have not been given the opportunity to truly find their voice. So what would you say to a teacher who's listening to this podcast, who's recognizing that I was not given these opportunities? I have this opportunity not to do this to the next generation of singers, but I am feeling some deep, deep feelings.
Yes.
What do you say when you got to reflect? I know I'm putting you on the spot there.
I know. I mean, I don't
owe
know.
me because you've been living in my house for 3 days.
So true. I've been eating your food. It's so true. Your delicious food. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, as in all good therapy, like sit with the feelings, sit with the feelings for a while. And also, I mean, I feel like we need to be gracious with ourselves, like we need to be so kind to ourselves because some of this like learning, where we're doing the best we can with the information we have. We're always doing the best we can with the information we have. I believe that about people, that we're doing the best we can with the information we have. And even when we've had those experiences ourselves and we still then bring them into, I mean, it's kind of like parenting, isn't it too? Like when we still bring them into the teaching studio and then like someone makes it explicit and we're like, oh, frack, really, that's not good. But like, just how gracious to yourself can you be? And then like, how can you start to just take those first steps out of it? What are some of the first steps you can take? One of the first steps you can take is like, what music are you actually listening to? What's on your playlist? What's in your ears? And then why do you love it? What is speaking to you about this music? And then is there anything that we're working on that you love as much? No? Okay. Let's see if we can find something that you love just as much. Or is there anything that's coming close to speaking to you as much as that? Please, but maybe not. But yeah, I mean, start to take those first steps. Be gracious to yourself. Let yourself, kind of be sad a little bit about it and be, it is what it is. You can't do something until you know.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Until it's conscious, you can't do anything about it. So
now you have a very unique offering coming up, and I would love for you to tell everybody about it. So, and I love this because it really is a cool opportunity for teachers. And I mean, well, I'm going to let you explain it because it's brilliant.
Right. So, and again, this sort of comes out of like, I'm working with voice teachers in this way, but it's really hard to like, I really want to make sure I want to actually dig into some of these concepts and actually like support voice teachers as they change their teaching and as they start to see these concepts, as they start to work them out in their teaching, and as they start to like, see what happens in their voice studios and the successes that their students have. And also I want to be able to support teachers as they find their own self-assessments for their own teaching, right? Like I want to be able to like allow for teachers to find those benchmarks within themselves and in their own teaching versus continually having to like draw their benchmarks from like whether or not their students got into XYZ college or not.
Right.
So out of that, I developed a program called the VoicePed Undegree. The VPUD for short. And it runs from September to April. So it runs in a sort of traditional academic year frame.
Okay.
And the reason I call it the Undegree is because it is, to my mind, it's like the opposite of what you would get in a formal degree. So we just finished the first cohort. shout out to the 8 folks who were in that cohort.
Bravo.
Yeah,
First
bravo.
cohort.
Wonderful. And from all over the world. It's really fantastic.
Wow.
Shout out to the Australians who were doing live sessions at like 1 a.m.
Oh gosh, time
I
zones,
know.
yes.
Yep. Shout out. And to some of the West Coasters who were getting up earlier than they wanted to for some sessions. Sorry. Anyway, so we just finished that in April, the first cohort, and learned a lot of things because it was the first time. But the main focus is really this. We come in the very beginning. We talk about what are your goals as a voice teacher? How will your studio look different? How will your teaching look different? What will have changed by the end of this? And of course, at the very beginning, you don't actually know that much yet about what will have changed, right? You have some ideas. You're like, most of the folks are like, I want to be a more confident teacher, right? I want to know that I'm, I want to feel like I'm doing the right thing, right? Like I want to just know that I'm doing the right thing, and I want to be more confident. I want to have more tools. In general, that's the sort of things that we come in with, and that's quite general. And so we start to, develop these. We talk about these principles, these teaching principles. Start to develop them. We do, learning modules, and then we do a seminar where we talk about them, and then we do labs where we're actually teaching and starting to implement them. And then we have, open studios where we're in each other's studios, and I'm doing a little bit of coaching while you're teaching.
Nice.
And we develop a set of those kind of find over fix, and we develop sort of a set of those. And as we're working through the academic year, we're co-developing which ones of these are the most important for me in my teaching.
Nice.
And then how will I know that I am doing them consistently, that I'm successfully implementing these? What are the actual benchmarks? And how will and also starting to notice the missed opportunities to do that. So when I'm observing a lesson, or when we're looking at recordings of you teaching, we're talking about where were the spots where you nailed a find over fix, and how do you know that you did it? Like, what did you do to nail that? Like, what happened? What were the words you used? What was the situation? And then where were the spots where you missed an opportunity to, I don't know, explore over explain? Where were the spots where you missed that opportunity? And then, okay, so that was a missed opportunity. Why was it a missed opportunity? What happened there? What did you do in that? And then what are you going to do next time? And also, what are the triggers that will allow you to recognize that you're about to miss the opportunity, and will allow you to get on the right path, right? That will allow you to take the opportunity to do the thing. So what is about to happen if because is about to come out of your mouth, that's probably going to be a missed opportunity to, right? You're probably about to explain something, maybe you might want to be like, give it a second and let's explore instead, right? So we develop throughout the whole year. We're working with each other, but with my my mentoring, but we're developing the tools to not only be explicit about what I want to change in my teaching, and also what it's going to look like when I change, but also to know when I'm actually on the path to change those things. So again, it's agency and self-assessment. And that also just trickles down into the teaching as well. Like, your students become, they start to develop more agency. And then these specialized topics as we go through as well. We do anatomy and physiology. We do like deeper understanding of, developing exercises, neurodivergent voices, like child voice, expanding voice, aging voice. We talk about all of that. We do talk about the sort of mechanics of things, but the focus right off the top is, how are you teaching?
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. I am going to put links to your website, to all of that information, and I want to thank you. I don't think there's a better person to have been here in person.
Amazing.
Finishing up season 7.
Amazing.
And you were in season 1.
Was
you know
I?
that? Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. Well, you were the first person I ever did a podcast with.
Oh, no way.
Aha! Yeah,
That's
you
amazing.
were the very first one.
Okay, full disclosure. Whenever I see like my friends that have been colleagues that have been on my podcast and I see you guys are all on other people's podcasts, I get a little like jealous. I'm like, oh, you're talking on their
hilarious.
podcast. Well, that probably wasn't as good as it was on my podcast. It's so
never as
ridiculous.
good. It's never
But I'm just sharing that with my listeners. I do get a little like, well, I bet you they didn't ask good questions like I did. But no, that's not true.
You
I'm sure they
asked amazing
I'm sure
questions.
they asked great questions. Anyhow, Shannon, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for your passion for helping teachers become better teachers, for really shaking things up. And I wanted to just say this quickly before I sign off. Is, your social media presence is really powerful, and it's amazing. Some people get a little ruffled, eh? Like I'm always, when I read your posts, I always go to the comments because there's always somebody who has been shook.
Yeah.
Because you're challenging a lot of the status quo.
Yeah.
And I have to say, you really handle that beautifully. Like, you're very kind. I'd be like, the things that I would say if the filter wasn't on, but it's hard. It's hard for people to see that we can do better. We can always do better, right? We can always do better. We can be better communicators. We can be better humans. We can be better teachers.
Yep.
So thank you for that. So I'm going to put a link to your podcast. I'm going to put a link to your socials.
Thank you.
Please find and follow Dr. Shannon Coates. If you are a voice teacher, you will learn so many things. And you also share fabulous resources. Your newsletter, Shannon's newsletter is just a whole bunch of great things you find, and there's always some really good stuff on there. So
Thank you.
Thank you for
I'm so
that.
glad.
So
Yours too. What?
we have to make this a habit. You come and record in person. It's so nice not talking on Zoom.
It's amazing.
Awesome. Well, I'm wishing you a happy summer, and
Thank you.
I'm glad you're here.
Thank you. This is wonderful. So wonderful.
A very special thank you to Shannon for that incredible conversation. Links to Shannon's information and her website are on the show notes, as well as links to our new online course. Please take a look at that. It's so much fun. And I do want to thank all of my guests on the podcast this past season. What an incredible lineup of incredible teachers, inspired humans that are just doing some incredible things. My friend, we will see you. We're taking our summer break. We've already got an incredible 8th season planned. It is going to be phenomenal. I cannot wait. I will see you in September, and I am wishing you an incredible summer, an incredible winter to all my Australian and Southern Hemisphere friends. And as always, inspired teaching and happy singing. All right. Sean Trotter, this is podcast 185 with in-person interview with Shannon Coates. Season finale. Oh, this is so perfect for a season finale. Dang. All right, so here we go. You have to stop laughing.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay. Welcome to Hemford.